The answer to today's video's question is no, not really, but yes, heaps. With a new player's handbook promising revisions to the rules, it's understandable that people are curious about what rules have actually changed. And so today, since Mr. Anpu42 asked and 10 class supporters voted for the question, we're going to try and dive in and just highlight some of the small and large changes that were made to the actual rules so that you can find them when you're running your game of 2024 D&D. The problem, of course, is that rules in Dungeons & Dragons are interconnected, and so while the rules for swinging a sword are pretty much the same as they were prior to this new release, the rules behind who is swinging the sword makes a big difference into how the play is going to come out. If you're new to the channel, my name is Timothy, though some people do call me Tim. I'm on a quest to reach 10k subs by the end of the year, and if I do, then I'm throwing you a party with a one-shot video, a celebration live stream, and a series of parodies recorded with my granddaughter, Jay LaBelle. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with anybody who might find it useful. In the spirit of openness and honesty, most of the guts of 5th edition are pretty much unchanged. The actual rules for how you accomplish anything of rolling a 20, adding a modifier, and trying to hit a target DC are pretty much still exactly the rules we've been using for not just the past decade, but also for a couple of editions of Dungeons & Dragons before that, and that's not about to change anytime soon. The overall rules system for 5th edition did not undergo a major overhaul, and so if you're looking for where combat has changed at a fundamental level, you're just not going to find it. The majority of the changes that have truly taken place so far, at least, are in your class. And so from experience of running my first couple of games of 2024 D&D, I would say that the biggest takeaway is that your class changes are the biggest changes, and you're going to need to spend a bit of time either pointing people back to or yourself revisiting the rules for how things work, because subtle changes to little abilities are having a big impact on what kind of options you have or don't have in play. Just running a barbarian, though they are still relatively simple, the changes there are really notable. Reckless attack lasting until the end of your turn, rages being able to last for up to 10 minutes but no longer re-lasting because you take damage, but instead because you're either harming somebody or forcing saving throws or spending a bonus action every round to keep it up, mean that there's a lot of different small things that need to be paid attention to, and so I really recommend that you point your players towards their class as often as possible and revisit those class options yourself so that you're as aware as you can be. But there are some segments of combat that actually saw some real changes. I would say that grappling and shoving is one section that had the largest amount of redesign, and it seems to be based around a little bit of a theme that is running through the player's handbook. I can't confirm yet because there's a couple of things that seem like they were a little bit left out, but the idea of opposed checks between a aggressor and a defender seems to have been something they're trying to depreciate back from in favor of moving more towards and leaning in harder on the simplicity of a target DC and a single roll to try and beat it. And so grappling and shoving got a redesign in that now they're a saving throw instead of a set of opposed checks, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff that's built into that changes. They were all baked into unarmed strikes and so on and so forth. If you want to check that out, I have a video on the topic with a bit of a deep dive. Similarly, there's been a bit of a focus on trying to make sure that player agency is left intact on a regular basis, and though unfortunately they didn't fix the stunned condition, which I was really hoping for, they did change the surprised condition so that people no longer missed out on their turn, but instead just either gained advantage or disadvantage upon their initiative rolls, so that you could more easily determine who was going first, who was going last, and it was more likely that the surpriser would go first and the surprised would go last, so that you could have options for a little bit of an upset or a change in there. And so far I've been using those rules and they're not terrible. They're kind of a fun addition, and it definitely feels better than having somebody have to sit out around simply because their perception check wasn't as high as somebody else in the group, and that that has felt a lot better for player agency and player enjoyment. But it does mean that you don't get any of these one full round of one team acting and the other team sitting there doing nothing, and that changes combat in a big way in those ambush circumstances. Another of the big changes that does change combat in general is the shift from the bonus action spell rule to the new one spell slot rule. There's been a lot of emphasis in recent publication, including the Player's Handbook, on things that do not extend your spell slot but still allow you to cast a spell. And now those interact very interestingly with the one spell slot per turn rule, so that you can, which is there to kind of control the bonus action economy like it used to be, and to keep people from burning through all their spells by quickening one and casting another, and so on and so forth. But the way you interact with it now is very different. Again, there's a video on the topic you can check out, probably actually over this shoulder instead of that shoulder, whatever. Another of the great things that got changed was that the weapon feats saw a lot of focus from the design team, and because of that, different weapon loadouts, the different sets of equipment that you might have, there's no longer a clear winner like there used to be in 2014. Sharpshooter and Great Weapon Master, we're looking at you. Instead, pretty much every option is viable in one way or another, and though some are going to do more or less damage, it's not necessarily just as cut and dry as it used to be, where there was a only option if you wanted to deal the largest amounts of damage and then everything else. Some of the rules changes there that have changed how we're dealing with things is going to be how you're dealing with two weapon fighting, which is going to be, you're going to see it at your table a lot more, and it's going to change from how it was, because now you have to interact with the bonus action offhand attack rule plus the nick property plus the new dual wielder feat that potentially with the nick property lets you get 2 extra attacks. It all interconnects, and two weapon fighting is probably a little bit more complex, but also a lot more likely to happen at the table now. So you're going to probably see some changes around that at your table. Speaking of which, weapons in general have changed because of the introduction of the weapon mastery system, and that has added a great level of both complexity and tactical choice to martial characters. So you are going to find that martial characters' turns take a little bit longer as they're trying to parse through the use of their special features. I think we're going to see a lot of usage of some of the features more over than we're going to see other features. For instance, topple, there's been reports that a lot of people are just making sure to use a topple weapon so they can knock people prone to get easy advantage, which is totally fair and pretty cool. But I've also seen some fun use already of the cleave feature for a great axe, or vexing along with thrown hand axes leading into melee combat and such. The properties are pretty potent, pretty cool, but they do add a little bit of complexity, so it's definitely slowing down the marshals while they're learning the system. And it's going to mean that combat is going to involve a lot more moving parts for the physical characters as well, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it does mean that combat in general is going to take a little bit longer than it did in 2014 to resolve, and especially until people start to figure themselves out when they're using these different systems. Cover rules and the like pretty much remained unchanged from how they were in the old edition, as did positioning and utilization of a grid, as did making individual attack rolls and other general features. Pretty much everything is as it was before. There was a bit of a rebalance on spells, with somewhat more of a focus on playability than necessarily the increase or decrease of power. So things that were going to be a headache for the DM to run have been redesigned, like conjure animals and those kinds of spells that just put a whole bunch of things on the field that bogged down play. And a lot of effort has gone into making these things not bog down play as much, and there have been a number of rebalances put throughout it to keep spells in line with one another, to tone things down in some cases. And of course there's been both hits and misses when it comes to power scaling, in that they fixed Witch Bolt to be a little bit better, but it still feels bad in some places. I personally like the redo on that one. Conjure Minor Elementals is ridiculous and needs some kind of rebalancing, but who knows, maybe that'll be around added and was a mistake in the first place. We can all hope. But generally speaking, it's pretty unchanged, and how you'll see it at the table is going to be mostly the same, hopefully with some quality of life improvements of just making things a little bit simpler. Though we are going to have to, for instance, relearn how to use mirror image. The new mirror image is easier to run than the old mirror image was, simply because it's got a simple system that doesn't require you to remember a bunch of different things. Instead, it's roll a dice for each image, and on a number plus, that image is destroyed as it blocks the attack. And so you can just roll a dice for each, roll less dice as it gets going. And so the idea is to simplify and streamline play for the new players, even if changing from one system to another is going to take us a little bit longer to figure out. Finally, I would say that dipping into classes got both easier and harder than it ever was before. It's easier in that now you can take a cleric or a druid dip for armor proficiency pretty much at any old time, and you don't have to pick a specific subclass in order to do so, thanks to the first level feature that'll give you the proficiencies that you're looking for. And similarly, you can dip into a warlock and take Pact of the Blade in order to get charisma physical attacks with a single level dip as an invocation, instead of having to specifically pick Hexblade in order to get that. As a fun dip, you can even now dip into monks in order to make all of your unarmed fighting into dexterity based stuff, and to get a bonus action attack every single round, no matter what class you happen to be. These are all some pretty fun, easy features for a first level dip, but it also got harder because dipping beyond one level now comes at the cost of your epic boon feat at 19th level, and there are some really good epic boon feats, so it's going to make it more of an opportunity cost to multi-class than it used to be for some classes. And going all the way to 17 and losing out on whatever your 17th level ability is of your class in order to get a second subclass is also a bigger cost than it used to be, because all of the abilities at the top end have been scaled up a little bit for many of them. So you're not only giving up your capstone, which obviously you don't care about if you're a ranger, and you're giving up your epic boon feat, which you should care about pretty much no matter who you are, but you also then have to decide whether or not it's worth giving up your 17th level ability. If, of course, your group is going to make it all the way to level 20. If you're only going to be playing into the mid-tiers, then frankly that doesn't matter whatsoever, so go with the gods, build what you like. Ultimately, it remains to be seen whether or not you're going to enjoy these changes, but combat as it was in 5th edition, crunchy but smooth, fun and interesting, exciting and tense, is still exactly how it used to be, and it's just the details and the options that have changed. I predict that the 2024 rules are going to entrance new players and woo the older ones as we continue to play with them. Thanks for being a rock star and watching all the way to the end of the video. It helps the channel and you are appreciated. Thank you to the tank class supporters who help keep the lights on, and until next time, here's 20 seconds or so of cello in a loving mood. Thanks for watching. Happy adventuring.
Hi, buddy. What you want? You want some Wobbins?